I was at an event in Milano, and I had the privilege. I went on a private tour of the Last Supper. It took almost 4 years to paint that, So it's a work in progress, right? If that takes 4 years, and he was a master of masters at that point, and it still took him 4 years. Being a work in progress is, right where we're supposed to be.
I say that we are all fallible human beings, and we are here to learn lessons and learn new things every day. That's what I tell my children, and I try to remember that as well.
Yeah, I know I've heard you share about in prison, finding inner peace and self-forgiveness, and that mitigates when we get hurried. Coach Wooden, the ball behind me, one of his tenets is be quick, but don't hurry. And that's where we might fall down and make mistakes or take a shortcut or not take that pause and think before we talk or decide something. And, that inner critic we have, it sounds like your process of meditating and, accessing fitness and well-being and all that activity mitigates that inner critic and clears the mind and clears the space out for you to flourish and blossom and accept our fallibility, right?
Yeah, you're calling it your inner critic. I call it your inner voice. Same thing, right? We all have this inner voice. I think oftentimes we get really good at shutting it down and not wanting to listen to it because it might not support things that we want to do.
Right.
And this is part of my decision-making process that I talk about, but the trick is we have to learn to listen to what our inner voice is saying and reflect on what it's saying versus, just ignoring and shutting it down. I know what happens.
Do you find with your clients and your keynote audiences and people you interact with, if they're willing and open and have shared with you, or you're able to distinguish that they're shutting that down, that's a direct correlate to vulnerability or lack thereof?
I'm not sure that they have ever shared it with me, but I've certainly seen it through the team building work that I do in corporations. So like, for example, I was just sitting with a C-suite executive team a couple of weeks ago, and we were doing like a 3-hour, core values and team building experience. And I start out with this really impactful exercise that inevitably forces every person to reflect on their life. And there are always going to be people in an organization, in a team like this, where you might have 75% that do the work, right? I give them some peace and some silence to really reflect. But so 75% will do the work, and people share things that they've never shared with their peers or their teams that they've been working with for 20 years, right? And these are the experiences that shape who we are and creates our core values and creates why we do things the way we do. But there's always that 25% that just can't let themselves get there. And so I think the trick in teams these days is to help foster more of that vulnerability. And it's not a one and done. It takes time to get to the point where those 25% of the people, whatever that number is for the team, that aren't willing to just let their guard down, right? Let their armor down, as Brene Brown says. It takes a constant sort of reinforcement, reiteration of why it's so important. And the more we talk about it, the more teams, those that are willing to be vulnerable, keep doing it. That 25% eventually do slowly open up. So, oftentimes I'll work with a team over a course of a year, like quarterly, I'll come in and you can see the shift at the end of the year of what happened, just because it was a constant reiteration, reinforcement of why being vulnerable, it's life-changing. It creates such a better feeling, and the power that you gain from that, like you said, is really transformative.
And, the 25%, if there is that, it's not a one and done. So if there's a slow burn and a long game of creating that culture, that environment, that ambiance, that ecosystem, it's not that they don't have a choice. In Spanish, we say, no, otra no me queda, right? There, it sounds better in Spanish, but it's not like there's no choice, but the pull and the appeal to slowly disarm, to take the opposite way of Brene saying it, you got your armor on, to disarm, becomes so attractive, and it's almost inevitable at some point, right? Because the energy it takes to stay so constrained and so closed.
Exactly.
It's
one of the things I have said to people is that I had to lose my freedom to gain complete freedom. And that that lesson for me, and what the reason I say that is the loss of my freedom has allowed me to be 100% vulnerable, which has given me such freedom because I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I don't hide behind something I want to hide behind. Like my friends say, I wear my heart on my sleeves. If I'm upset, you'll know I'm upset,
Right.
and sometimes that's
I
not so good, but
yeah.
because I have no filter. But
I
it's
mean,
just that.